Welcome, everyone. I'm Peter Maravellis, and it's great to see you all here in the Poetry Room. And to those of you online, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ohlone people, also known as the San Francisco Bay Area. We're very happy you can be with us as well. So it is always a delight to be celebrating a City Lights title, especially this particular title. Tonight's event is being co-sponsored by the San Francisco LGBT Center. We are both pleased to be celebrating the publication of My Body is Paper, Stories and Poems. It is by Gil Cuadros. It is edited by Pablo Alvarez, Kevin Martin, Rafael Pérez-Torres, and Terry Wolverton. Gil Cuadros was a groundbreaking gay Latino writer whose work explored the intersections of race, sexuality, and spirituality. City Lights published his book, City of God, back in the 90s. It has gained a following over the years. This collected work, which we're celebrating, comprises a stunning treasure trove of writings. And we hope tonight to give a sampling of Gil Cuadros' genius, both in the reading of his work and in discussion. We have brought together an all-star cast of people who've had a very, very deep connection with his work. So together with some local writers, we have editors who have worked with him in the past and who have also unearthed some really wonderful material as of late. So to get the evening started, I would like to welcome Greyson Wright from the San Francisco LGBT Center to say a few words to get the evening started.
Thank you. I'm a little bit shorter. All good. Thank you for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. And thank you for this opportunity to be here. I'm very grateful to be able to share space with you all today. So as mentioned, my name is Greyson. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a bilingual community program specialist at the SF LGBT Center. How many of y'all have been to the center, actually? Awesome. So I see a few hands. So yeah, y'all should definitely come back. We love people. And for all of y'all that haven't been there yet, I'll share a little bit about what we do. So my role here at the center primarily encompasses resource connection, community building, connecting folks to resources so that they can reach their goals and be supported. And the center as a whole has been connecting the LGBT community to opportunities, resources, and most importantly, each other for more than 20 years now, providing direct service and support for over 7,000 people a year. They come in needing employment counseling, connections to stable housing, financial wellness resources, information and referrals, and more. We are connectors, welcoming over 100,000 visitors to the building and partnering with hundreds of community organizations yearly. We serve as a community hub, providing local LGBT community members with a spectrum of events, connection to resources, partnership opportunities that strengthen our diverse cultural landscape. So some of our ongoing programs include community building programming and events such as Queer Tango, yoga with an amazing instructor named Key, and our newest trans and gender expansive programming, which has started with a wonderful, wonderful person named Sola Habibi. We also have volunteer opportunities, information and referral services, which connects individuals to in-depth assistance and providing service navigation, as well as a cyber center that offers free computer, printer, and internet access. We also have a youth program that supports LGBTQ youth ages 16 to 24 on a path to self-efficacy, connection, and stability through positive youth development. Some of our ongoing programs include a dedicated youth drop-in space, providing a full spectrum of services, anywhere from community building to crisis intervention, social connections, access to essential needs such as food and hygiene supplies, as well as drop-in mental health services, housing navigation, and educational workshops. We also have an employment department, which supports job seekers. We also have a special department specifically for trans and gender nonconforming individuals that are seeking jobs, the first in the nation. We also have inclusive workshops, one-on-one coaching, job readiness, anything you can imagine. We also offer a range of educational programs centered on building financial wellness, money coaching. We also have housing support, including below market rate housing, affordable rental workshops and counseling, as well as small business counseling and free financial coaching through the Smart Money Coaching Program. One of our last programs that I'd like to talk about is our arts and culture program, which encompasses visual, literary, and performance arts, as well as cultural events and civic engagement at the center within our local community spaces. Some of our ongoing programs include our Pillar concert series, Queer Vibes, art exhibits, film screenings, and Vibe and Live, which is live musical performances. We also recently started an open mic. It's called Mic Queer Phone. It's a monthly event as well. And I lost my place, my apologies. We also wanted to extend an invitation to you all. On Saturday, we're having a block party. So this will be from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. There's going to be drag performances. There's going to be food. It's going to be a really good time. We really hope to see you. And thank you again for this opportunity. I'm very grateful to be here. Passing it back over. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Grayson. So our first reader of the evening is Flavia Elisa Mora, who's going to be reading the poem A Netless Heaven. Flavia Elisa Mora is a queer Mexican migrant artist, activist, and community organizer. Their work delves into the exploration of identity, relationships, migration story, family, and community history. Please join us in giving them a warm welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. So as mentioned, the poem I will recite is A Netless Heaven. 1. Has it been years already? Bus ride downtown, head against the rattled window, and all the passengers whispering how sad it was, as if to cross themselves fortune red in blood. I was sick, tie loose around my neck, yellow phlegm coughed into tissue, pillbox time alarm. The bus driver leaned back, strained to hear the young woman, business skirt, small radio in hand. Magic has HIV. When I got home, mother had already called. Red light answer machine flash, cries in the message. Her favorite player, his smile, never will be the same. Underneath covers, my bones hurt. Cradled the phone, she said, he'll do a lot of good. He'll beat this thing. And like an unspooled movie, I saw she didn't cry when I told her, face furrowed in disappointment, said she knew I'd end up like this. 2. Sunday school catechism, the father would have us play for an hour to wind us down. 2 hard wooden seats, chalkboard, words, the act of contrition, rosary beads on name carved desks. He kneeled behind me on the asphalt. His black cloth chest humped my back, guided me blundering hands around the basketball. The flesh of his palms burned. I could feel his holy water breath, soft as a feather wings brushed along the jugular of my neck. When I released the ball to a netless heaven, he didn't respond, just pulled the next boy close to him, grazed his hand under the boy's chin. Thank you.
So our next 3 guests have had a very, very special connection to Gil Cuadros. They have at different times edited Gil's work. We have Rafael Pérez-Torres, who is professor of English and gender studies at UCLA, also the author of Movements in Chicano Poetry, as well as co-editor of the Chicano Studies Reader. We also welcome back Amy Scholder, who is no stranger to City Lights. She was an editor here for many years and also has been embedded in the publishing community in the United States. She's editor at large here at City Lights now, and she's also on the board of the City Lights Foundation and produces documentary films. And we have Kevin J. Martin, who is the executor of the Gil Cuadros estate and a longtime copy editor and writer, and currently serving as senior writer and associate editor at Magellan TV. Please join us in giving them a warm welcome.
Hi, everybody. Wow, thank you from the center. It's so great to be in community with you. Really appreciate you being here with us, and it's meaningful to hear about your services and to know that San Francisco has the back of LGBTQ people. I, as Peter mentioned, have a long history with City Lights, and worked here from about 1984 to 1995. And a lot of the work that I was interested in publishing at that time had to do with AIDS and its impact on our cultural lives and the people we were losing, the work that we were that we were making at that really devastating time. When Gil sent me a manuscript of poems and stories that became City of God, I really never read anything quite like it before. Chicano writer from East LA, writing about his experience growing up queer in Los Angeles, where I'm from, and really capturing also this feeling of kind of urgency of losing so much in so little time as a young person. Was just a voice I had never really encountered before, and was so deeply moved to publish that work. City of God came out. It did modestly well. I left San Francisco around a year later, and have really been grateful to City Lights ever since that the book has stayed in print and that it could find its way to readers. But I didn't really know if it did. I mean, you never really know as an editor at an indie publisher. Like, it's sort of like, you're putting like a message in a bottle, and you hope that that work gets discovered over time, especially if the author's not alive to kind of promote their own stories. So to my delight, I met Justin Torres around 2014, few years after We the Animals came out, which I admired just enormously. And he came up to me and he said, "Amy, thank you so much for publishing City of God. It changed my life." And I was like, wow, that's so validating. And I was thrilled to hear that. And also felt like, well, it was also thanks to City Lights that book stayed in print. It was thanks to Terry Wolverton, who had been a mentor to Gil and so many other writers in Los Angeles. And I think who, otherwise Gil's work never would have ended up at my desk at City Lights. So I started to feel this new kind of relationship with that book, and was thrilled when on the 25th anniversary of City of God, is that right? I learned about this conference that was happening at Cal State East LA, organized by Pablo Alvarez. And it was at that point I became aware of Kevin, and I became aware of Rafa, and that there was community, academic community, reading community, literary community, really building around Gil's work 25 years later. So I was, again, delighted to hear that. And then talk about the gift that keeps giving. I got a call, I don't know, a couple of years ago. When was it? Maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago, from Elaine, who said, who's the publisher of City Lights, and who said, "I just got a note from Terry. There's a new manuscript of Gil Cuadros writings." was like, what? How can that be? And I learned, and I will pass this over to these folks. I learned that after City of God came out in 1994, but before Gil passed away from AIDS and HIV complications, he had been writing and writing and writing. And that thanks to the efforts of Rafa and Kevin and Terry and Pablo and others, that work now is being published in this book that we're celebrating today.
And I got involved with this project because I've been teaching Gil's work for years, for decades, maybe 20 some years. I've been teaching his work to my classes. And I was asked to write an encyclopedia entry about Gil, an academic encyclopedia entry. And so I was talking to my friend Luis Alfaro, who knew Gil from back in the activist days of the 1980s and 1990s. And he said, you must get in touch with Kevin, you must get in touch with Amy, you must get in touch with Pablo, who is tuning in, and we miss you here, Pablo. But it's and that became how I got involved in learning more about this writer who was just he grew up, he's 2 years younger than I am, grew up in Los Angeles, raised in a suburb very much like I grew up, not much to do in the suburbs of Los Angeles except look for trouble and yearn for something more. And what Gil was yearning for was to feel connected to the world, really, but also to feel connected to culture and to feel like he's a part of something bigger than the world that he was exposed to. And he was very good friends with a young girl and later woman, Laura Aguilar, who was also like Gil, from a dysfunctional family, a violent family. And they sort of took solace with each other. They both discovered each other, helped each other discover their own sexuality. They helped each other come out. And they actually, there's a very funny story that Laura tells about how she would go, she and Gil would go together to bookstores, adult bookstores, and she would buy all these Playgirl and whatever other sort of pornography was there for women. And he would buy, you know, Hustler and Playboy and whatever. And they'd go back to the car and then switch the magazines. So they supported each other both in terms of their exploring their sexuality and exploring the world. They encouraged each other really as artists. And Laura became a well-known photographer who took a number of photographs of Gil, including the cover of the book that was a part of their growing together as artists. Gil grew up in a sort of middle-class Chicano family, very Catholic family, and knew from an early age that he was very queer and that this was something he could not share with his family. And he found a queer community outside of his family, outside of Montebello. And he found a gentleman by the name of John Maloche, who was a few years older than him, more worldly than he was, and he was drawn to what John knew and that he didn't. That they became lovers. And spent a number of months together until Gil's mother confronted him and asked him point blank, you know, I know you've been out, you've been doing these things. And he admitted that he was gay, and his mother immediately kicked him out. She said he was a bad example to his two younger brothers, who she then kept from Gil, from what I understand, most of his life. So he was luckily, Laura came by. She brought her beat up old car, took whatever they could from Gil's house and drove over to John Maloche's house in Pasadena. And that's where Gil ended up living until tragically, John learned that he was HIV positive and died of AIDS related complications in 1987. And Gil found out that he too was HIV positive. And was given very, very ill, was given 6 months to live. And Laura really encouraged him to process his feelings and to process what he was going through by joining a writing workshop, by writing a group. And that's when he got in touch with Terry Wolverton. Laura got him in touch with Terry, and they began writing. He began writing in that workshop, began writing poetry, and that's where ultimately the City of God came from, was that effort. But what we were excited about as a group was finding out what he kept writing, what was created after City of God was published, what other material was there. And thankfully we were able to, well, for a number of reasons, Kevin installed the archive at the One Institute in Los Angeles, which is associated with USC. And Pablo and I managed to get an appointment to get into the archive the day before it closed for a year and a half. So this was in 1920, 1920, 2022, when this was the spring of 2022. We began, we had literally 4 hours to scan whatever we could, what material we could. And this is in part the result. There's still material that we couldn't get to, but this was the material that we put together collectively, that really as a group, we came together and decided these were the pieces of writing that not only reflected the quality of what Gil brought as an artist, but also reveal sort of his expanding exploration and how he was moving forward. And so it's in some ways, it's wonderful to have this collection, but it's also incredibly painful because you see what kind of artist he was becoming and what kind of artist he could have been. So there's a real tragedy to this, but it was also part of what really drove us to want to get this material out, to share with everybody, and to keep Gil's legacy moving forward. So it's been a wonderful project. It's been a wonderful experience, and Kevin can tell a little bit about ultimately how this all came together.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Martin, and I'm the executor of the Gil Cuadros estate. The reason I am the executor is that Gil and I were very close in the 90s. We were lovers for a while. We had a very emotional and tumultuous relationship, I would say. It lasted about 1.5 years, but we stayed very, very close afterwards. He met Marcus Antonio, who became his lover until Marcus's death. And then after Marcus died, I became Gil's caregiver and caretaker. And so he left me his estate, including the papers, which I kept in my house until time passed. And a variety of people contacted me wanting to know more about Gil, more about the book, and whether there was more stuff to read. And I always said, please come over to my house. I'll show you his papers. And I did that for a couple of people, including Pablo Alvarez, who was very enthusiastic about what he read, and in fact convinced me that the papers needed to be stored archivally. And so I donated them to the One Institute in Los Angeles, where they are now available to be seen on appointment. I do want to say, if you'd like to know more about me, I totally encourage you to read City of God and to read My Body as Paper. Gil's writing is beautiful. He takes difficult situations and transforms it into lyrical prose. I think I would even call it prose poems. He writes poetry and then he writes prose that is so tight, so compact, so full of great imagery, full of detail, full of characterization, and actually full of narration. He tells stories in a beautiful way. And I can't recommend it highly enough. I just want to say that it's an honor for me to have taken a part in the work that we did to get this book together. I want to credit, if I haven't already done this, I want to credit Pablo Alvarez. He was very enthusiastic, and it was his idea. I had a pipe dream that I would maybe find somebody who would be interested in putting together a chapbook, maybe, of his unpublished work, which some of which I saw on Gil's computer, which he left me. But I had no idea the richness and the quality of the work that was to be discovered. I had no idea that Gil had written tight, clean, well constructed poems and fiction that just are mind blowing. I just want to invite you to read the book. I want everybody to read both books. But since we're here talking about My Body as Paper, start with My Body of Paper. It has a wonderful foreword by Justin Torres. Thank you, Justin Torres. He's a great writer and wrote beautifully about his introduction to Gil's work. And then in a little while, we're going to be hearing the first story from My Body as Paper that Joseph Cassara will be reading later on. And I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's a wonderful experience for me, and I hope for you too.
And I just want to say, when we were talking about this, planning this event and this celebration, this book launch for My Body as Paper, it just didn't seem right to have 3 editors talking about the work. We agreed that the most exciting thing would be to have a new generation of poets who would enjoy and really understand Gil as a poet and as a writer, and who would offer their own voices. And I would just want to say, Joseph and Flavia, we so appreciate that you join us tonight. And on this occasion, I've gotten to know your work, and it's just been so wonderful to feel like we are now in community. And I really appreciate you coming here to be with us tonight.
So, as mentioned, next up is Joseph Cassara reading the story Hands. Joseph is the author of The House of Impossible Beauties, published by Echo Books, which won the 2019 Edmund White Award for debut fiction and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. He currently serves as the George and Judy Marcus Endowed Chair of Creative Writing at San Francisco State University. Please join us in giving him a warm welcome. How's the sound? Can you hear me? Louder? How about now? Okay. Hands. I am prepared. I have had my will drawn and notarized. I've given away old books from my library that I will never read again. I've gotten rid of porno magazines and cock rings, things that would be difficult or compromising for my beloved to discard. Mother has all my baby pictures I stole. I have paid for my cremation. I carry a pocket full of change to give to panhandlers. My elementary catechism has returned, those who help the lowliest. Marcus says he just doesn't understand me sometimes, says he has dreams for us, a home we will build together. But it seems to him I'm giving parts of my life away. I sit quietly at the deli booth, staring at my unfinished sandwich. It is rare now for me to be hungry. The bones in my face have become more distinct. It is when I don't respond that he gets annoyed, but I can't help it. I don't want to change his feelings or argue the probabilities. I don't believe I have long. My blood has turned against me. There is no one here to heal me. The sunlight from the window poured heavily onto his face, rugged and aged. Myself, I have to stay away from the sun. My face discolors from all the medications I take. Marcus has become quiet, maybe brooding. I hear a knock on the window next to me. It is a tall man, very dark and in a ragged black suit. He points with a dirty finger at the tray that holds my half-eaten sandwich.
then brings his fingers to his mouth. I nod my head. Marcus hates when I do stuff like that, and he barks, "Why'd you do that? Why can't you just save it for later?" The man comes to our table, pulls the tray closer to him, unwraps the sandwich from the paper. Marcus leans back, far away. The man is intimidating. His form towers over us. I want to tell him to take it away, but he just stands there and eats. Finally, Marcus says, "There's an empty table over there." The man gives thanks and then asks for the rest of my drink, which I refuse because I know it would piss Marcus off, since he bought lunch. Marcus and I are silent for the rest of his lunch break. It has become a ritual of sorts to have lunch on Thursday with Marcus at his work. Sometimes I am too early, or I can see that he is busy with a client. The nursery is very dense and serene, and as he walks through it, he is in total command, like a god in his Eden. The customers are rapt at his every word on how to take care of the plant, what it is suited for, what it will look like in a year, 2 years. This is one of the reasons I love him, his ability to nurture. It is like he knows the secrets of life and wants to share them with me. I don't want to be seen at his work. This is a way I show him my love. My face looks too haggard. I have strange discolorations on my forehead and chest. I look as if I am going to die soon. I don't want any rumors started about Marcus and me at his work. I don't want him having to answer difficult questions about his friend. I can imagine his soiled hands clenching. When I am early or he's busy, I go sit at this small Catholic church across the street. The parking lot is usually empty, and there's a porch by the rectory which I go sit on. The father has looked at me before through his window and knows that I am just there to wait. Often when I am there, a large Mexican woman comes by. She carries paper bags from Pick and Save. Over the brims of the bags, plastic and silk flowers stick out. Some weeks, they are all blue. Others, purple. Still other times, pink and red. The woman has taken to nodding at me. ¿Cómo está? One day, with a smile on my face, I said, "Merci." She gave me a look, and then I knew I'd made a mistake. "Bien, bien, señora." She laughed and said, "Ay." French has always come easier to me. I'm sure she thinks I'm some sort of pocho, like an Oreo, brown on the outside, white on the inside. The large woman usually wears something that my grandmother would wear, a kind of flowery smock so she won't get dirty. She decorates the statue of Mary that stands on the corner of the parking lot under a large, sturdy eucalyptus tree. On holidays, she's put plastic jack-o'-lanterns. Dramatic pause for drink. Jack-o'-lanterns, styrofoam snowmen at Mary's feet, and always lots and lots of fake flowers. Marcus has often told me that he'd give me some perennials, other flowering plants to give to the woman, but I think she wouldn't want them. I think she loves the fake flowers' everlasting quality. She does it as a devotion, and when she finishes, she prays, her knees on the cement, her head bowed down, hands pressed together. I've told Marcus it is like she has her own form of serenity, that she sees beauty over life, or that she sees her actions as more important than presenting living things. The most notable thing about the Mary statue is that she has no hands. Being at the rectory alone makes me think of death. Would I do it to myself if I got really ill? What if I start losing my mind? What if I start looking more of a freak than I already do and people start staring? What if it becomes too painful for Marcus to be with me? My upbringing haunts me like a shadow of the tree. I was taught that I could never go to heaven if I killed myself. Even the most ill cannot do that because life is a gift we must fully use or otherwise appear ungrateful. My archbishop taught me that. My parents had set up those meetings with Archbishop Mahoney because they didn't know what to do with me and they were afraid a doctor would lock me up in an institution. When I was 12, I had already tried pills I got at school and from my father's medicine cabinet. The paramedic who revived me cried openly, said he'd never seen a young boy try such a thing. Worse yet, my parents were horrified when they came out to the garage and saw lit stacks of newspaper soaked with lighter fluid surrounding me. Parts of my arms and legs were burned severely, and today I carry those scars. No one ever understood why I would become so quiet, disappear into my parents' closet for hours in the dark. Sometimes I would torture my pets, make the other children on our block cry. Still, the only feeling I have now is guilt. And when I think of myself, I think I've wasted my life. All I remember fully, though, is a sound, the rush of air igniting. I figure the hands of Mary must have broken off during an earthquake, or maybe due to vandals. There's a bronze plaque that reads, "I have no hands, but yours." The day I read that, the Mexican woman had come up behind me quietly and placed her hand on my shoulder. She started speaking Spanish much too quickly for me to understand. When she figured out I didn't speak Spanish well enough, she switched over to a slow English. "My name is Yolanda." It was my turn now to say, "¿Cómo está?" There was a gentleness in her voice. "I see you here all the time." I told her I was waiting for a friend. "Oh, you can help me though?" She pulled out a small hand rake and said, "Weeds." I got onto my knees with a chuckle and started raking out the weeds that had grown in the flower bed. Eventually, my hands began to ache from the exertion. It was very quiet work. She changed the vases and put blue flowers and then some calla lilies in the glass containers. I told her how Marcus worked at the nursery across the street and said that I could give her some flowers and other plants if she wanted. I told her maybe some small ivy around the edges would be nice. She smiled and said, "Gracias." I started to notice the meditative quality of working this soil, how there was something like a warm charge I received from the earth, that I became more spirit than being. And like the wind flittering through the eucalyptus tree, it felt like she was speaking to me telepathically. My son used to do this every Thursday before I took over. I stopped what I was doing. He loved real plants, fussed over the small garden. The father mentioned how devoted Tulio was, how his love was an example to all of us. I was so proud of him. On Yoli's face, I saw a pride I wished my own parents could give me. The women of the church would surround me and praise me for raising such a fine young man, but nobody saw how lonely he was, how he would drink in my kitchen till he passed out crying, "Mama, Mama." I turned back to my work, flustered because I knew how he needed to create beauty in his life. When the earthquake came, she said, and the hands of Mary broke, he wanted the church to have it fixed, but Father said, "No, it is more symbolic this way." Julio could not understand. It was like the Mother of God was a real person to him and needed to be healed. I huffed, thinking of my own life. She turned her face away from me. Everyone was surprised that day. I wasn't. They came to my house, the father, women of the church. I could tell they had been crying. They said, "Yoli, don't cry, but you have to see your son. You have to come with us." Julio had said he was going to trim down the tree over Mary, that the boughs were too low. So off he went with the ladder and some rope. The shade of the tree covered us both as she spoke. Mary stands so far away from the street, no one noticed Julio stringing up the rope, pushing himself off the ladder. When I saw him, it seemed the air gently rocked him back and forth, his feet nearly touching the head of Mary. It was many days before I cried. Somehow I knew it was all my fault. I wanted to ask her why, but I knew. Julio saw no life ahead, and simply creating these altars was not enough. He was a man who wanted to heal and to be healed. Marcus came at that moment, asked me to see a ficus tree he wanted to bring home. All I could say to Yoli was, I'm sorry, so sorry. Marcus was proud of the ficus he had picked for me. It looked sturdy, the roots unbound. Near the trees were shelves with pots and ceramic figures of cherubs and gargoyles. I noticed that a few of the cherubs' arms were broken, parts of the wings missing. I could see myself grinding the arms down just to the hands, and I started contemplating whether I should use glue or plaster, maybe cement. I couldn't tell if it was an act of creation or violence against the church, maybe both. In my mind, I saw what Tulio must have looked like. His smile must have been dazzling. I picked up the broken arm and asked Marcus if I could possibly have this and another hand. Marcus shrugged his shoulders, questioned me, do I want the tree or what? I kissed him lightly on the mouth, surrounded by the lushness of the nursery. He looked embarrassed in his paradise.
Thank you, Joseph. I mean, that is such an excellent example of just the exquisite prose that this man could write. We're going to welcome back now Flavia, Elisa, Mora to be reading from Mickey and Pluto Undressed Behind the Walls of Sleeping Beauty Castle, and also a piece called Cheap Rent.
I love this poem so much. It just makes me think of like my gay boyfriends and how they happen to not only be gay boys but are obsessed with Mickey Mouse. So um this poem is yeah, it's just very endearing in that sense. Mickey's face is the first to come off. He is sweaty around his neck. His large white gloves are tossed to the tile floor. Slowly, he starts to unbutton the rest of his furry body. Pluto, dog-tired, discards his hind quarters, revealing the legs and calves of a real man. He hooks his tail up in a locker alongside the others, row after row of fantasy creatures, skins without volume, retired from the pawing. The petting, cannon flashes, and constant waving. All he wants to do now is slip up of his briefs, grab a wink, and go to the bars. He begins to remove his collar, but that's when Mickey, now fully human, unleashes the leather strap. Letting the ears and wet nose fall, the next day, they return to Main Street. Their deep red mouths are open and friendly, kissing the silky tops of children's heads, smiling for cameras that begin to rewind. Thank you. Okay, and then this next one, Cheap Rent. One of the tenants, a single woman, vacuums the hallway for a break in rent, while another maintains the laundry room. We constantly meet on the stairs. She huffs and I pause for my heart. Still another tenant who shall remain nameless takes care of the garden behind the apartment, a small patio of flower boxes, decorative stones, a weather-worn bench. My bedroom window overlooks the garden, and I've watched this thin, swarthy man dig out all his plants, arrange them in some random new order. Where one stood in a poinsettia, there's now a plumbago, then a monstera, then a hydrangea. The only thing predictable is the rosemary, thrusting out of the soil like small interruptions between the more tended, transitory foliage. Sometimes I borrow a few sprigs, use in soups, sprinkle the dry leaves into sauces, rub them against the flesh of chicken. At night, I place them in my bath. The man told me it's good for all evils in the body. He cuts sprays of small blue flowers, his hands tense on shears. I lay my glasses on the tub's edge. Stems grace my thighs. He tells me it's especially good for the heart.
So we thought we would open it up now since we have the editors here. So Rafael and Kevin and Amy, if we could come up one more time. For those of you online, if you'd like to ask questions, use the chat. We've also posted links in the chat with which you may purchase books. So the way we're going to conduct this, wait till I come to you with the microphone. Otherwise, the people online are not going to be able to hear your question. So let me get ready for that while the rest of you are coming up. Maybe I'm going to start it with you, Amy, because this has been a very interesting journey for you, going from City of God to this. And you mentioned how surprised you were when you learned there was more material. But talk a little bit about that journey and how maybe it's moved you emotionally, and the fact that this material has sort of all of a sudden made itself available.
Peter. What comes to mind in response to that, I don't know if it's an answer, but in response to that is that I think that there's a kind of cultural reckoning that we have collectively around experiences, right, that are deeply emotional and troubling. For example, the AIDS epidemic. And it took a while, right? 1995 was the year when the protease inhibitors, when that clinical trial turned into finally like, oh, maybe we can turn AIDS into a chronic illness and it's not a death sentence. So, so then what happened between 1995 and I don't know, 20, 25 years later was, I think, a lot of processing. For those of us who lived that time, it was like survivor guilt, healing, self-destruction, self-sabotage, joyous appreciation of life, all of it, I think has probably been the experience for many of us. And what I've noticed in terms of the literary response is that it's also taken that much time. So in a way, it's the right time for My Body is Paper, because I feel like there's a receptivity now to think about what that experience was for the culture. And if you didn't live it, I think you didn't learn about it in school because it was too new then, but now you're adult and you're aware of it and you're curious. And so each generation is having its own experience of this very significant thing, right? And we're going to no doubt have that with COVID, right? We're all so eager to forget about it and to move on. And I think, all the millions of people who died and all of the bizarre rituals that we performed and then we shed as soon as we thought we could, like now we're just living our lives. Many of us don't have that privilege still, but those of us who do, right, we're just like, we're moving on. But I do think then there will be this reckoning and catching up. So that's what comes to mind with your generous question, even though it's not really an answer.
Thank you for that. I would pose the same question to the two of you because you have a different relationship, really.
Could you restate the question, please?
Thinking about the when you were first introduced to the writing,
Okay.
and following that trajectory to now,
Oh,
to
sure.
discovering this material, and just
Sure.
what that emotional journey has been for you.
Well, I was very emotionally involved with Gil, and I was around for the publication of City of God. I read it and I loved it, and I just was astounded at how he took these incidents from our daily lives and transformed them into heart-rending prose and poetry. There's a short story in City of God where he just dissects his and my relationship, and then forgives me and forgives himself in the story. So it just had a deep meaning for me. And as you know, I was with Gil. I may have said this, I was his caretaker in his final years. And I felt lost after he died. I felt that I was entering a new world without him. And I was unmoored for quite a while. And I didn't know how to live with his memory or how to process the memory. And I mostly moved on, to be honest. And, you know, went out into the world and found a new boyfriend and had my own experiences and lived my life. But I always would come back to Gil, especially because I saved his last poems on my computer. I moved them over from his to mine. So I would read them from time to time, and they always were moving to me. But it didn't come to me it didn't come back to me strongly until I got requests from academics and others to have access to his unpublished work. And then I was in the maelstrom once again of remembering the conditions or the situations that gave rise to the works that were read tonight and the other works in the book. And I feel like I've had the opportunity to really take the book to heart. I've never read a book so much. I've never read a book so closely in my life as this book, because I copy edited it. And I loved that process. So I would say for me, I was in the wilderness for 10 to 15 years. And I was rescued by people like Pablo Alvarez, who befriended me while he was researching his undergraduate paper on Gil, and then his master's thesis, and then his PhD. So I was with him through all of that. And that really kept Gil alive for me. And I just feel like I keep the book next to my computer all the time, because he's alive for me. And this book is the way he did it. Having this book is a treasure. And I feel really grateful that I was able to be a part of bringing it out into the world. So that's me. Your turn.
Oh, wow. Everything I have to say is going to be a denouement after that. It's a little disappointing because I never knew Gil. I had no personal relationship with the person, but I've had a very personal relationship with his writing, because it's just such a magnificent expression of human pain and human contradictions. And that's kind of what his work really delves in, is I think turning an experience that is incredibly painful and turning that human suffering into something that becomes beautiful. And that is just a magical transformation that he does. And I think that's what he was searching for in his own life, right? That how to make the suffering that he and his people, his community were going through into something that could be beautiful, right? And I think that we survive it, and that we can go back and revisit and relive all of that pain through his poetry is part of the triumph. It's part of this, that beauty that is possible. even though it's a painful beauty. And that's what his work is like. And the more I come back to it, the more I appreciate it for that quality of really expressing clearly what the specific experience of his community and of that time period, but also the contradictions of just, we occupy these bodies that are both bringing us incredible pleasure and killing us at the same time. And I think he just touches on what it feels like to be human, and particularly to be a human in a moment where you're in a crucible. What kind of human do you become? And what he became was this magnificent, really beautiful, from everything I have been able to find out, a really beautiful person, even as he was fading away. And this is, the writing here, I think, is a beautiful testament to that process, and to him as a person, and to him as an artist.
And not to miss the opportunity, but I'm very curious, since we have a younger generation of writers here, what was it like for the two of you to discover this work? And then tonight, to be able to read it. Start with you, Flavia.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It definitely feels like an honor to be able to read and connect with Gil's work, just because I actually, to be honest, was not familiar with his work till recently. And as soon as I read just like 3 poems, I was like, wow, like this is just really beautiful. Just the way he kind of, like you were mentioning, encapsulates the pain and the contradiction, and also just is really amazing at just capturing the time and capturing this sense of not knowing how long he has left, and not knowing how so I'm honestly really curious to also as to how that shifted his work after being diagnosed, how that shifted the writing itself, but also the process of having to go to the paper knowing this information, right? So yeah, I think I have more questions than thoughts, because I don't know him, but I think the writing is very relatable in certain ways for me, as I'm a Mexican indigenous person who grew up in the Mission District in San Francisco, so around a lot of Chicanismo. So when sitting with his work, it was very relatable, and it was just beautiful to kind of grab his book. I remember telling my partner about it, and we both kind of cradled in bed and read his poems together, which was really special. So yeah, thank you.
So I don't think that I've ever done a reading of someone else's work before. And so this was a very intimate and kind of emotional kind of task at hand, because while the story is fiction, it is first person and it feels like nonfiction. And so I knew as I was preparing that I was essentially going to come up here and kind of channel the consciousness of someone who is no longer with us. And that was like a reading experience that I don't think I've ever had before. That's kind of what's on my mind immediately. Yeah.
I think we can open it out to the audience. We have one back here.
Oh, sorry, I'm a little nervous. First of all, thank you for putting this book out. I actually grew up in Montebello and went to the same high school as Laura and Gil. So finding City of God was really important to me. And I'm only 28. So you were like, who even reads this? It does reach younger generations. And it's really important to me. So thank you. And I found out this was coming out like a week ago, and same reaction. I was like, what? Like new works and unheard of, So thank you for putting these out. But I'm interested in the process. Like you said, you went to the archive and scanned a bunch of things. And if there's any things that didn't make it into the book that you wish did, and what it was like considering what was important enough to put in this second one. And I am familiar with the story about your relationship, and it's a really beautiful story. So it's nice to hear from someone.
It had its ups and downs,
Yeah,
for
just like
sure.
any relationship.
As you can tell, if you read as you did, City of God. So I want to talk. Actually, you need to answer part of this. We didn't have a lot of time for a stupid reason, but we weren't able to spend a lot of time going through Gil's papers because the One Institute closed down on a particular day, and Rafa and Pablo had literally one day to go through everything. So we believe that there are unfinished works that may be finished. We just didn't catch them. But in terms of the editorial process, we ended up with 44. We started out with more, and we had a sort of relationship of 4 equal editors. We brought each piece for discussion. This took months. We took each piece and discussed it, and then we voted up or down. And if it got 3 yeses, then it made the book. Or if it got only 2 yeses, then the 2 people could try to make a strong case. So that's how we did the selection. I think there's more stuff. And I think it's for academics or other interested people to make an appointment at the One Institute and look through. I mean, for example, and you really can talk about this better, we didn't go through his journals at all. So his personal writing, we completely left untouched. And there's a lot I know from knowing Gil, there's a lot of personal material in there, especially about the relationship with Marcus. And that was Gil's ultimate relationship. It's the one he wanted to keep for the rest of his life. But it too had, as you heard in Hands, it had its ups and downs. Gil is a wonderful writer, a wonderful spirit, a very strong consumer of culture. He was really interested in learning about the arts of today, the underground arts, the alternative arts, and he created in that style. At the same time, he could be kind of a prick, a little bit, and that's why I broke up with him, because although we had a great connection, he was sometimes unkind, and he writes about it in the book, and I see him reliving his mother and father in that behavior. And I didn't see it at the time, but I see it now. And it was more than I could personally handle at that time. But he made great art, and he made great, readable, uplifting art about tragedy. So
Yeah, that's pretty much the process it took. We literally had I think 4 hours from 11 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon to scan as much as we could. And part of what's missing is my own technical. I scanned 2 out of 4 pages of some stories and things like that. That is just, we were under unbelievable pressure to get through what we could get through. And there's still a lot of material that's if any of you are interested, honestly, I think it's definitely worth going to take a look at the One Institute. And so it's a lovely place to go look as well. So that was our process, and it was a very egalitarian process, which is part of also what I loved. And everybody approached this with the utmost sense of love and respect and care for the word, and for what the words would mean if they got published, and what they would say about Gil. So I think we were very conscious of being careful about the quality of the material that represents who Gil is and what his legacy is.
And I'll just add that, so the four editors of this book are Rafa and Kevin, obviously, and Terry Wolverton and Pablo Alvarez, who I believe are on our Zoom channel. And so for me, as the acquiring editor of this book, it was just a dream, because there was so much intentionality in every single piece that was selected that I actually had nothing to do.
One thing that all of us editors agreed on and felt in our hearts is that this was a labor of love. We stated it clearly that we were doing this because we love Gil's work and we love Gil's legacy. We want to see it extend and last in the world. So we worked for years, and our reward is this great book. So that's our labor of love. You could see it in print right there.
And I can't think of a better place to maybe now we find ourselves at the top of the hour, to thank you all for joining us tonight, the speakers and those of you here in the audience and those of you online. As I mentioned, we have posted links. Please do pick up a copy, and our editors are happy to sign books. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Be well.